And just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. And we see here all the different stakeholder groups that make up this technical advisory committee, our federal agencies, ports, utilities, state agencies, associations, air districts, and national labs. Yeah, so thanks again for being here. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could drop your name and organization in the chat, and any questions you have, feel free to drop them in the chat as well. We have a pretty packed agenda for today, so we may be flexible with how much time we give to certain discussion sections for today. But we'll start off with a brief project overview. We'll go through some project updates around our Advanced Transportation Research Center and pilot sites, some recently published reports, and our regional freight heat map presentation and discussion, followed by our corridor planning roundtable discussion, and lastly, our next steps and closing items. Next slide. So just as a reminder, eTruck's purpose is really to create a California research hub that advances high-power charging infrastructure along key freight corridors to accelerate the electrification of the heavy-duty vehicle market. Our goals and objectives sort of break the work up into these 4 work areas you see here. Equity and workforce development, where we engage with community-based organizations, healthcare organizations, academia, and more, in order to implement a community-first approach. Market needs and technology assessment, where we collaborate with fleets, manufacturers, utilities, and planning agencies to determine market and technology needs. Research and development, which is our Advanced Transportation Research Center, our pilot demonstration sites, and all of that related work. And lastly, public corridor strategies, where we plan, design, and deploy innovative charging strategies for heavy-duty electric vehicles. And all of these work areas work in harmony and coordination with one another. Next slide. So the goal of this technical advisory committee is really to guide the direction of the project to ensure achievement of our overall project goals. And one of the functions we'll really be focusing on today is to ensure linkage between projects given a broader commercial vehicle electrification perspective, which my colleagues will be discussing soon in our heat map presentation and our corridor planning roundtable discussion. Next slide. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ken for project updates.
Thanks, Nate. Yeah, just some quick updates on our Advanced Transportation Research Center and our demonstration sites. So we have a research center and test facility that's being built out in Pomona, California, inside SCE's EV Technical Center. We split this up into 2 phases. The first phase is what we're calling the lower powered charging lab, and that's actually currently under construction right now. There's a whole gamut of quayside equipment that's being installed as we speak, and there's a forecasted completion date of March 2024. And then the second phase of the research center and the lab is going to accommodate some, real high-powered charging capabilities. They'll have medium voltage capabilities, so you can do megawatt level testing there. And that portion of the lab is forecasted to be complete at the end of this year. You can get more information on it on the eTruck website. There's a link below. We are taking applications right now for using the first phase of the lab, which is the lower powered test facility. So if there's any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat, and also feel free to go to the website and find out more information on it. So we have 2 demonstration sites in the Southern California region. As you can see on the map, one is MHX Solutions over in Carson, California. The second one is Travel Centers of America in Ontario. MHX is a drayage application. It's we're installing 4 CCS units and a energy storage system at that location. And then the Travel Center is a traditional truck stop, a travel center site, where we are coordinating to have a megawatt charger installed. If you go to the next slide, we can talk through some brief timelines. So both projects are in the engineering phase. With travel centers, we are in engineering design right now, forecasting complete construction of the site, at least the make-ready portion for the chargers, by Q4 of 2024. At this time, the megawatt charger that we are working on procuring is forecasted to be available in early 2025. So that's the reason for the gap there between when the site is complete and when the charger is going to be installed. For the MHX site, also in early engineering right now. That one we're going to move a little bit quicker because we are just using CCS units at that location. So we are forecasting that one to be completed by end of this year and start collecting data and have the first trucks plugged in by early 2025. That'll pass it on to Liz.
All right, thank you, Ken. So we'll have just a quick update here on the reports that have come out in 2023, sorry. So the EPRI and CalSTART team have been conducting various surveys and interviews to assess technology maturity assessment of high power and megawatt level charging technology. So namely the interviews with original equipment manufacturers, tier 1 component suppliers, and the EVSE equipment companies. So both these reports, which summarizes the results from these surveys and interviews, can be found on the eTruck website. And I will be sharing the link in the chat. We also partnered in 2023 with SCAG and Cambridge Systematics to conduct a freight industry outreach efforts. So we have over 100 surveys, interviews, and focus groups results coming out of this memo. So if we go on to the next slide. So here are some of the key findings from this memo. So as we can see on the diagram to the right, no big surprises in terms of what are the key concerns and barriers to ZEV truck adoption. But some interesting survey results that came out can be found on the next slide. So no big surprise, funding and the cost of funding the zero emission transition of fleets is listed as a main concern for fleet operators. But an interesting result that came out of the survey is also that out of the companies interviewed, 71% had little to no knowledge of state and federal incentives to support the purchase of zero emission trucks. So here is an opportunity for eTruck to bridge that gap in information, namely through our ITAC, our Industry Technology Advisory Committee. And also, if we look here to the right-hand side, another interesting result is when we asked the kind of timelines to start their transitioning, we see that over 40% of respondents are switching between now and 2030. So quite a short-term window here. So if we go back to the slide, the previous slide. Some of the implications here in terms of next steps for eTruck. So this also shows us that there is a need to streamline timelines between the kind of purchase of the zero emission vehicles, which is happening in the short term, and the timelines for equipment, charging equipment installment, which can take between 6 to 12 months. And so here we're seeing a need for public charging sites, not only for the smaller fleets and the long haul fleets, which will be reliant on opportunity charging along their trips versus overnight charging, but also for all fleets in general, as they're looking to bridge the gap between the installment time periods and purchasing their zero emission vehicles. All right, we can move on to presenting. So we have 3 maps to present to you today. So this first one here is kind of work that has been happening throughout 2022 and 2023. So the eTruck team has been working on collecting information on open, planned, and proposed medium and heavy duty charging stations in California. So this will be used as a tool in caudal planning, which is why we decided to include proposed stations, as we are looking, once we start having information on mapping charging needs in California, we can integrate this information to see in the short and medium term where charging stations are planned in California. So another use case for this also is we have noticed a gap in a centralized hub of information for fleets to be able to plan the zero emission transition. So just kind of information for fleets on where there is availability for charging and how to apply, for example, for those stations. And so we've been working on an interactive map, which will be available on the eTruck website. At this point in time, we're looking at the end of February, as it still has to go through feedback from our ITAC and from the CEC. So I'm going to quickly take over the screen here to show you the draft map. All right, can everyone see this?
Yes.
Amazing, thank you. So this is what we have so far in our draft interactive map, which will be on the eTruck website. So we have color-coded at the moment, so we can see here blue for public and open, orange for public and in progress, and purple for proposed. So in progress meaning it's under construction and planned to be open soon, and proposed could be, for example, recipients of grants, but they have not yet started construction. And then we also have private sites. So this information is more for the caudal planning tool, which can also be filtered out in a map that we share with fleets like this. So we have at the moment a total of 28 sites that are public on our map. And if I zoom into Bakersfield here, I can also show you the kind of information that will be available for each station. So the primary operator, how many charges, and also the maximum charging level at this station. And some features that we would also like to add, if it's planned or proposed, an estimated opening date, and also information on how to apply for a specific station. So this could be the link to the website, a form to fill out, or whether a subscription is needed, for example, for a specific station. So I'm just gonna move around. For example, we can zoom in here to the Los Angeles area, and we can see that there is a lot of activity happening around the port of Long Beach, for example. There's several stations that are open, currently being built and proposed as well. All right, we can go back to the main map, to the main PowerPoint, sorry. All right, so I'm just going to pause here for a minute if there's any questions on this, and I also have a few discussion topics for the TAC members here. The first one is, are you aware of any similar projects that are happening? As we are looking to have the most accurate map possible, we are interested in kind of collaborating with any other team in terms of cross-referencing data sources and having the most accurate map possible. And also, maybe do you have any other ideas of use cases for this type of information? Oh, I see a hand up from, go ahead.
John
Elizabeth.
McEwen.
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. John McEwen, EPA here. Thanks, Elizabeth, for this. I just had a question on the filtering criteria to designate whether a station is in fact heavy duty accessible. Is it by power rating? Is there a certain access egress type spatial factor that you guys are putting in here? So I'm just curious, of the 28 stations that are highlighted in the draft version, how are those are selected versus, like standard level 2 stations, et cetera, because obviously there'd be a lot more of those.
Exactly, that's a very good question. So this is again a subject of debate in our team. So firstly, there is what has been advertised as being able to host medium and heavy duty using, for example, I've named the sources here in terms of the AF, the alternative fueling station locator, and then individual research and companies that advertise as medium and heavy duty. So we are also looking into specific, for example, height restrictions that may at this point in time not be included in the alternative fueling station locator. So yes, it's a work in progress. At this point in time, it's just whether it's been advertised as medium and heavy duty accessible.
Thank you.
Janine?
Hey, yes, Janine Tackett, San Joaquin Valley Air District, filling in for Todd DeYoung today. This is great. I just wanted to, say thank you for putting this together, because we definitely see a need for a tool like this. We also have several projects going on, whether through various grant award solicitations or through our in-house heavy-duty infrastructure program. So definitely those are projects that we would like to see make their way on your map as well. Definitely a great tool to have. So just wanted to let you know our support in this, and that yes, we do have projects we can share to add to that.
Amazing. Thank you, Janine. Yes, this is definitely a work in progress. And the reason why we want it to be an interactive map is also that we are able to add as recipients are named in the future, and also open for collaboration on this project too. Watson?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on John's question about the criteria in there, and John, if you have other ideas, or everybody on the call, if you have other ideas on criteria to include, because one of the things I was talking about with the team also was just like some of these spots are pull through and some of them aren't pull through. If you like look at Tesla and Modesta thing, they had to unhitch and pull the truck into that spot, which is a different kind of infrastructure availability than something that's kind of more set up like a traditional diesel refueling island where like the truck and the trailer can pull in and drive through, and so we're trying to figure out what are those key criteria things that we need to include in there. So I like definitely want to engage more, get feedback on what those kind of things are. What are the key things we should be trying to include here? So thanks, John, for that question, because it's perfect.
Thank you,
We
Watson.
can always count on John for good questions, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, do you have a kilowatt rating for the chargers? Or the maximum?
Yes, so we're working
that's included.
Yeah, that is included. We have that information. We just need to individually input it for each station.
And is this something? This is something that's a work in progress. I get it. Is it accessible today where I could put a link to it?
Yes.
Or?
Yes, we are working on that, as it's kind of we're very interested in cross-referencing sources and adding any sources that we may have missed. So we do have an Excel spreadsheet with all of the stations that are currently on this map that we can share. And we also.
But is it something that that's publicly accessible, like through your eTruck website?
Not at the moment. So we're looking
Okay.
at end of February at this point
Okay,
in time.
perfect. Thank you.
Liz, I also see a question in the chat from Catherine Garrison. Will you consider including information from electric utilities who may also know about MHD charging stations coming online?
Absolutely. Yeah. Any data source that you may have that would make this map as accurate as possible is welcome.
But that spreadsheet you talked about, I think we'd be interested in that as well for now.
Good to know.
Thank you.
And I see a hand from Jimmy O'Day.
Yeah, Elizabeth, this is just really excellent to see. One flag, the alternative fuel station locator, the AFTC from USD. I know we have a couple, at least one USD person on the call. I've looked at a few of the sites that are listed, and I believe the filter is actually heavy duty that they're listed as being applicable for, not just medium heavy duty. And I've done a few Google Street Map views, and they're like not medium heavy duty compatible. It's like a Shell gas station that's just like a regular for a passenger vehicle. And I flagged those for, they have like a form you can submit information on. And I don't know if they've been updated or not, but maybe just a flag that some of those may or may not have been tagged correctly. I don't know where, the information is coming from the station provider, and they just check a bunch of boxes, or how that gets to US DOE or not.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you, Jimmy. So actually a member of our team is also in contact with them, asking very similar questions. So hopefully we have an answer soon.
And I didn't raise my hand because I'm having trouble finding my raise hand sign. And Elizabeth, John, I know you were going to speak later, but do you want to say anything now, or do you want later? I understand, or we understand that CEC is also developing a map. So we just, who's the best person to coordinate with, etc. We were doing this, one, because the E-Truck project needed to do it. Two, because just the essence of understanding where what is to help as it informs our corridor planning modeling work that is part of the E-Truck project.
Yeah, this whole effort is excellent. We are working on a map as well. I think we have data from a lot of the public stations, with some of the private data is not as easy to come by. So we're working through that. So I think it would be really great if we coordinate. I know Christy on our team has been the lead on that, but I'd be happy to, if you wanted to reach out to me, I'd be happy to make that connection.
That would be, yes, definitely helpful. One of the purposes of our meetings here is to coordinate people and to share information from one agency to another, from one project to another. So thanks for that.
All right, we can also come back to this later on if people think of questions throughout the TAC meeting. Otherwise, we can move on to the next section.
Oh, John has a question.
Yeah, sorry everyone to slow the roll there, but I just before we move on to the roundtable, I did have a question on project status for Ken in terms of the technical elements of the demonstration and the status of test data that will likely be generated by the project. And Ken, I don't know if you could speak to that in terms of, in a previous iteration of this group, I know Watson and Yasna had talked to us a little bit about the time horizon for the project period with CEC, and it not quite aligning with where the technical elements are going to be in terms of data acquisition. So I'm just curious kind of what the latest perspective is on that in terms of when we actually might get in-use data from at least the phase 1 component at the Pomona station with SoCal Edison, let alone the phase 2 station for higher power charging. For EPA, that deliverable is incredibly timely. So we're curious as to what you guys think in terms of timing for those data deliverables.
Hey, John. Yeah, I'll try my best to answer that question. So it sounds like there was a two-part question because the demonstration sites are the two sites in Ontario and Carson, and data collection for those sites begins forecasted begins starting in 2025 for both sites. One is earlier than the other. But then you also mentioned the test facility in Pomona where we are taking in sort of applications for EVSE manufacturers and OEM manufacturers to come in and do testing. So I guess to answer your question, I mean, we're going to get a year's worth of data starting in 2025 for the demonstration site. There's not actual data that's going to be released coming out of the test facilities because that is that's going to be proprietary data for the manufacturers that do their testing that test their equipment in the labs. The data that we're going to provide is more so high level analytics on the type of equipment that was being tested, what was done in the lab, and sort of like a description of how the lab was used without really diving deep into the actual data that was captured during testing, if that makes sense.
So if I may, just to clarify, I see Watson might have some additional color here, and sorry to the rest of the group for taking time away from the agenda on this topic. But so just to read between the lines, it seems as though the in-use data would likely be available for this group probably in early 2026 is the estimate. And then
Yes.
for the test center, data may or may not be available from those EVSPs and OEMs who come to the Edison Pomona facility and decide to voluntarily test their equipment. And they'll have a choice as to whether they want to keep it proprietary or whether they want to share it either publicly or with a limited number of advisors like the group here.
Yeah, essentially. Watson, did
Okay.
you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to also add, John, I think you were asking kind of specifically about timeline of MCS, and is that what you're okay? So we're going to be able to complete construction of these sites before we apparently will be able to get the MCS hardware itself. But we're talking within months though, and so one of the things we're working through is given the timelines, do we wait to start collecting data until for several months after the construction is complete to just install the MCS hardware and then start data collection at that point, which means we had to extend the project a little bit and is that what you were asking about, John?
Yeah, and maybe Yasna has an additional piece of information on this too. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of for the technologies that CEC funded to demonstrate, when will we actually see some data about how they're being utilized by the test fleet? Because that's really the ultimate objective. I mean, all these, analytical tools and mapping projects and others in industry assessments are valuable, of course, but really what we want to see is how does high power charging work with a battery electric truck? We haven't seen that yet in use for a fleet that's doing, freight carrying and for-profit business. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to ascertain is when do you guys think that we might see at least an initial set of data around that? And when the charging bus has been decided, when the OEM group has been decided, when the fleet partners have been decided, there's a lot of those decisions are still being made. I can see that, but just trying to get your best guess as to when we might expect to see some of those deliverables, because it seems like it may be a little bit more protracted than what was initially in the work scope with CEC, and that's fine. I'm just trying to figure out when that might be, either optimistically or conservatively.
Yeah. So what's great is one of the sites is a logistics operator. They have vehicles on order. They for this site, they actually have another site with some more vehicles. And so once that infrastructure at the logistics company is installed, I think we're going to be starting to collect data almost immediately after and so you know, if the TAC wants to start getting some early reads on that data, we'll be able to kind of like provide some early reads on that data. And like I said, the good thing is the vehicles are going to be available concurrently with that infrastructure. The other site is a public, you know, like a fully publicly accessible site. There's not a dedicated fleet to that specific site. It's a trucking travel plaza. And so there'll be CCS hardware installed at that location as part of another CEC funded project for heavy duty trucks. And then we'll have a lane for the MCS hardware. And so that CCS hardware that's getting installed there may be a couple months ahead of the MCS hardware, given where the vendor's telling us availability. But again, we're talking about, for both parts of this is like the latter part of 2024, first, second quarter 2025, where we'll be getting all this in place. I know Patricia and the South Coast AQMD are particularly interested in making sure that we have vehicles using the MCS hardware, and how do we make sure that, you know, that like we're not, it's not just infrastructure, that there's utilization of that MCS hardware. And that's, you know, Yaz's probably going to talk more about like the efforts there on what we're going to do to try and make sure that we address both parts of this equation, which is not just getting the infrastructure there, but also getting utilization of vehicles out there so we can start understanding and like you said, collecting data. But we're encouraged that the MCS hardware, we have a better timeline from vendors now on this of when that's available, and some comfort level that they'll meet it. Yeah, so we have some comfort level on that.
I'll jump in and I'll try to be short because I know we have so many topics here. John, good question. And I think what Watson told you is yes, we're going to collect the data. We're going to anonymize it if we have to and pull out some of insensitive information that might be sensitive to the fleet or to the OEM, if you will. But you guys internal, like the TAC and our ITech group, definitely, I'd love to start sharing sort of on a quarterly basis, you know, as we're doing the analysis, and show you some early results before it goes public. But for sure, the requirement of the grant and our desire is to make the learnings and the data analysis of this available to the larger industry. This is why we're doing this. So thank you for a good question. And I think we're all on board. We are, as you see, slipping a little bit on the dates. And it's a big project, and it's tough, but we'll work with you and keep asking us the questions that you need, information that you need from this. We want to hear it because they'll inform our analytical side and how the data that we analyze or data that we collect in that.
Thank you, Ken, Yaza, and Watson. We should probably move on. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was a great discussion. I think now, yeah, we can move into our roundtable. So next slide. Yeah, we're fortunate to have Jimmy O'Day, Assistant Deputy Director of Transportation Electrification at Caltrans, Elizabeth John, Branch Manager of Commercial and Industrial ZEV Technologies and Infrastructure at the California Energy Commission, Patricia Cohen, Program Supervisor of Technology Demonstration at South Coast Air Quality Management District, and Todd DeYoung, Director of Strategies and Incentives at the San Joaquin Valley APCD, Air Pollution Control District. So I'm really happy to have everybody here to discuss, in general, the ongoing efforts at their agencies and authorities to coordinate the development of infrastructure along corridors where information gaps exist in that effort and where e-truck research can be impactful. Each of our panelists will give a brief overview of the major projects or programs or efforts that they're pursuing, and then we'll have a group discussion together of some of the key questions. I'll set the stage though, just with a few quick words, if we could go to the next slide, about why we're discussing this. One of our, as has already been alluded to, one of our major tasks in eTruck is to take our learnings from our needs assessments, our research in high power charging, our testing lab, and develop a strategic plan which incorporates the path breaking work we're doing. So our needs assessment, our regional plan, which we're working on, our statewide plan, and strategy and implementation guidance are all direct outputs of the project. You can go to the next slide. Or we, yeah. Increasingly, we've made some great progress with Cambridge Systematics and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and our other partners to develop one of the more detailed public models for freight volume forecasting and the spatial dynamics of ZEB adoption in the country. That's part of this project. That's part of the outputs of this project, where the work involves simulation modeling of freight flows and potential refueling behavior dynamics that's extremely sophisticated and detailed. You can see some initial outputs here on this slide. These are only first cut outputs, but wanted to show them as an indication of the concreteness of the work at the stage, which will go on through the year. This is on the freight volumes that we're forecasting. And if you go to the next slide, this will also inform deployment siting forecasting, which is inclusive of detailed behavioral dynamics around refueling and finding sites which are most optimal for high power charging in particular. This is a first cut output, so those circles indicate charging sites and their and the size roughly indicates power. But I'll note this again, this is a preview. What you see is just a first cut draft. None of the locations shown in here are final. But what I do want to note is that this work in general will help inform updates to the core model. It's part of using the core model of the state AB 2127 infrastructure forecast, the legislatively mandated biannual California infrastructure needs assessment. And that, if you can move to the next slide, that brings it more into the territory of the discussion of that we'll have on the panel. Work on parameters and assumptions involved in this modeling. And as we're discussing high power charging, John drew the attention of the discussion into this territory. This modeling and this work that's drilling down more into how systemically high power charging will be used needs to get to the actual use cases, but the modeling itself is getting more sophisticated, and some of the implementation decisions that some of our panelists are actually making are based on assumptions and parameterizations that are moving in this territory already. And they're already also linking up, right, funding availability to those assumptions. And so we're all, in general, moving towards scenarios and ideas and thoughts about how to implement these funds that are actually building out a charging network. I've listed here some of California's, and you can see there's many of them. There's many frameworks in California. I've just listed a few here. There's Goods Movement Frameworks, SB 671, and the Interregional Transportation Strategic Plan, as well as many other frameworks on the left that are pertinent in California. And on the right, you can see some of the funding sources that agencies, implementers in general have to draw from, both at the federal level, using these funds, and at the state level, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, the Interregional Transportation Program, various CARB programs, the Clean Transportation Program. All of this work is going on. So we wanted to talk more, if you can move to the next slide, also about how plans are being developed and what they're assuming. So here are a few assessments and projects tied to funding pots that are directing the charging infrastructure investment to corridors. That's all of their aimed corridors are the target of these. Our panelists can refer to these, but I wanted them just here on one slide to reference if that's useful. You see on the left, the SB 671 priority freight corridors. This is an assessment that was done by the California Transportation Commission, and it found it designated major priority corridors and assessed the needs and the funding availability, or the funding that would be needed to build out supportive infrastructure for corridor development. You have the West Coast Charging and Fueling Corridor Project in the middle there. Jimmy can talk a little bit about this more, but this was a deployment plan that stemmed out of efforts and assessments. And then on the right too, there's ITSP corridors. There's the alternative fuel corridor designations. All these corridor designations and corridor plans and corridor assumptions are floating around and are actually being taken up by our implementers. So turning to our panelists, if you can move to the next slide. We have 3 questions on the left here, but they all involve really the question is, we have these big macro forecasts, micro implementation decisions that are going on. And we're now kind of working in this meso level, this in between. And we wanted to know what is driving these plans, where are the information gaps in formulating them, and where eTruck and some of the assumptions and the general thinking and research that we're doing on this project can help and intervene. On the right, you'll see some of the coordinating efforts that some of our panelists will talk about. I'll turn in order. I'll turn to Elizabeth actually first, and we'll go through and talk about each of these, and then open it up to discussion about those questions on the left. Elizabeth, do you want to kind of outline some of the yeah.
I have some slides. I don't know if that is helpful.
Oh yeah. They're not visible yet.
Should I be sharing them?
I'm pulling them up right now.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And Michael, I was just going to note, I think Janine said she's replacing our dear Todd DeYoung today. So thank you, Janine, for coming and joining us. And you should join us anytime anyway.
Thank you so much, Yeza.
Yeah, sorry, Janine. Thanks. I didn't see. Sorry. Yeah, great to have you.
Okay. It's
Great. So thank you. I'll try to go through these slides fairly quickly, but I wanted to give an overview of what the CEC is working on. So just as a quick background, the CEC is the state lead for zero emission vehicle infrastructure, and we administer a program called the Clean Transportation Program, which is funded through a small surcharge on California vehicle registrations and provides about $100 million per year for projects. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of some of the funding that will be available over the next few years. As you can see, there is a push towards MDHD fleets and fleet infrastructure with a long-term focus on ZEV infrastructure for trucks and buses. Next slide, please. So in partnership with our funding investments, we also prepare a couple of infrastructure analyses. So we prepare a charging infrastructure assessment, which is a requirement of AB 2127, as well as medium and heavy duty hydrogen infrastructure assessment, which is a requirement of Senate Bill 643. And so we know that zero emission refueling infrastructure in the right locations with the right capabilities is going to be very necessary for, you know, an experience that's convenient for fleet drivers, and in order to reach all the benefits of our intended climate change goals. And so I'll quickly speak first about the Assembly Bill 2127 report, which is a statewide assessment of the charging infrastructure needed to meet the state's zero emission vehicle goals through 2030. And so on the medium heavy duty side, the target is 100% of operations by 2045 where feasible, and many sectors, with many sectors having more aggressive targets. And, you know, this is a pathway for goals that are also set in the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation and the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. So this assessment requires the CEC to assess charging needs, and the report focuses on plug-in electric vehicles, which includes both battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Next slide, please. So in 2030, almost 110,000 chargers will be needed at depots and 5,500 chargers will be needed at public locations. And then by 2035, this increases to 256,000 depot chargers and 8,500 public chargers. And more depot chargers are needed than public chargers because depot charging allows vehicles to make the best use of vehicle idle time, avoid waiting for public charging during the trip, and avoid having to pay for high-powered public charging. The model assumes that most vehicles will rely on depot charging, but the bulk of their charging, and will need to charge at a depot every 1 to 3 days, depending on driving patterns and vehicle range. And depot chargers can serve vehicles both in the daytime and at night. For depots, a wide range of charging speeds, power levels are included largely in relation to vehicle size and battery capacity, with larger vehicles and batteries requiring higher speed depot charging. For public charging, charging speeds and power levels depend largely on vehicle technology. And so this assessment assumes that 350 kW chargers will be the default for on-route public chargers, because 350 kW charging systems have already begun to be deployed in large numbers. And if the megawatt charging system or other charging systems that permit higher charging speeds are adopted rapidly, the resulting charging system would likely include more high-powered public chargers, but fewer total public chargers. In 2030, about 82% of total MDHD charging load is estimated to be served by depot charging, and 18% is served from public charging. And so the CEC is going to continue to monitor the market and make modeling adjustments over time as the MDHD industry evolves, as it could gravitate towards public chargers in greater numbers. Next slide, please. So we do know that that there could be impacts to the grid for MDHD vehicles. Less downtime and the resultant need for higher power charging could present some challenges, but I think the good news is that California state agencies like CEC, CPUC, and CARB are working together to address this, and we recognize that the goal of electrified vehicles must be accompanied by focused efforts to examine and account for the impacts of those vehicles on the grid. And for this slide, I just wanted to highlight 2 of CEC's load impacts tools. We have the heavy load model, which analyzes truck travel patterns, load curve scenarios, and charging demand to inform where loads could exist and behave through time. And then in tandem, we have the EVSE deployment and grid evaluation tool, or the EDGE tool, which seeks to integrate those results with utility grid capacity data to inform users about how those loads could impact certain regions. Next slide, please. And then quickly, as I mentioned, we also are releasing our inaugural SB 643 report, which focuses on hydrogen. I think the expectation is that it'll hopefully be released this week, but keep an eye out for that. And so the preliminary results presented indicate that there's a level of uncertainty with what infrastructure will be needed by 2030 and 2035. Much of the uncertainty can be contributed to what fleet owners will decide in terms of which zero emission technology will work best for their operations. But we do see hydrogen playing a role in medium and heavy duty fleets. Next slide, please. And so to highlight one of our recent solicitations, the critical path solicitation aimed to support MDHD-ZEV hydrogen refueling and or electric charging stations along the priority clean freight corridors, highlighted by Michael under SB 671 as designed by the California Transportation Commission. And the funding opportunity was released on September 26th. Applications were due on November 17th. There was $30 million available. Our expectation is that a notice of proposed awards will come out this month, so hopefully we can share those projects at a future meeting. And just some highlights of the projects. Awards will be between $5 and $20 million. Each project must install infrastructure at least 2 locations, and each location is either required to have at least 10 high-powered chargers of at least 150 kW, or 3 hydrogen 700 bar dispensing platforms, or if both technologies are used, 6 DCFCs and 2 hydrogen stations. And then charging stations cannot be farther than 125 miles apart. Hydrogen stations cannot be farther than 300 miles apart. And then if it's a mixed use station, the application would be 125 miles. All locations should be within 1 linear mile from the corridor segment's off-ramp. And the intent of the solicitation is to release it annually so that we're able to build a network for medium heavy duty vehicles along the major highway corridors. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we did also conduct a solicitation for innovative charging solutions for medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. This solicitation addressed both innovative technologies and innovative business models. I think there are a few chargers here that, or a few projects here that focus on technologies that would support corridor charging. There's a project that is intended for overnight truck charging. There's another one that focuses on MCS. So we'll be excited to share more about these projects once they get going. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. That's great. We can now maybe turn it to Jimmy next, and we'll save some questions and just discussion for after.
Yeah, hey everyone. Really good to be here. Thanks, Michael and Yasna, for having me. So Jimmy O'Day, Assistant Deputy Director for Transportation Electrification at Caltrans. So yeah, I guess just to shape what Caltrans is doing and where we fit in with so much great work going across the state. Energy Commission really, leading the way on ZEV infrastructure in the state. Great work by CARB, CPUC. What is the role of Caltrans in this conversation? That's really been the focus of my work, defining that lane, so to speak, at Caltrans. I've been here for a little over a year. And so the 4 things that Caltrans brings to the equation, and that's what we're just trying to be a team player and helping the state meet its goals where where gaps need to be filled. We have access, so the 4, one being funding, we have access to different pots of funding through transportation dollars, and there's a fair amount of money out there right now, and so we can talk about those pots of funding. We have a fair amount of land under Caltrans operation, our own right-of-way, that we're thinking about ways that this could be used for charging hydrogen infrastructure. We have really good relationships with local agencies that we think can help bring state projects and collaborations to the locals through our traditional transportation projects. And last but certainly not least, we have a lot of data just in monitoring the state highway system that has fed into a lot of the models and work that others have done. And so maybe that's one place to say where we're really not doing a ton of work. That's traditionally Caltrans, is a place, and state DOTs are a place where so much planning happens. And we're lucky in California that there's been so much great planning that's happened already. The SB 671 project out of the California Transportation Commission identifying the corridors, all of the infrastructure needs assessments happening at the CEC. So I guess we're at a great place where a lot of plans have been made, and it's really about filling in the gaps. So credit to also just really long-standing efforts along the West Coast. John leading the West Coast Collaborative, the West Coast efforts to build light-duty infrastructure along the West Coast has certainly laid a lot of the groundwork for what we've been doing in collaboration with Oregon and Washington to try to build a truck charging and hydrogen corridor. Great work from CalSTART with Michael, your recent analysis on the priority corridors. Also ICCT, just looking at a list of EPRI doing great work. So I'd say we're just at a really great spot to just take what's out there and try to implement it. And that's what really the tact we took with the charging and fueling infrastructure grant program that was been discussed and advertised last year through FHWA. The project was, there was a short application window, and our knee-jerk reaction was, what projects do we just know are least regrets and are just ready to go off the shelf, so to speak. And the truck corridor project along I-5 and the key freight corridors in Southern California and the Bay Area were really just stood out as we need to develop those no matter what. So we collaborated with Oregon, Washington Departments of Transportation and put that application in. Unfortunately, weren't funded with the CFI awards that were announced last week. A lot of great funding did come to California, including in Central Valley that I hope Janine will probably talk about. But we think we still have a very good vision for this network along the West Coast, stations 100 miles apart for charging, 300 miles for hydrogens, like Elizabeth said, in the CEC side of the state work. And yeah, now looking to what pots of funding could potentially fund that vision. Maybe just to say a couple more things about state pots of funding that we have. The Trade Corridors Enhancement Program. This is funding from the SB1 gas and diesel taxes that traditionally funds freight improvements, but ZEV infrastructure is an eligible component. And the last cycle of TCEP projects that were just funded in June, 100 million of the $1 billion pot of funding that was TCEP. It was 2 cycles, 2 fiscal years in the last cycle that was awarded. 10%, 100 million went to ZEV projects. So 7 charging stations in Southern California at Travel Centers for America locations, and 6 hydrogen stations also in Southern California at Nikola's developing those. So really 2 really big projects in those. Port of Oakland got a great microgrid grant that I'm not sure if Tim will touch on today at all. And then Sac County, Watt EV got a really large charging station with Watt EV. So $100 million in TCEP. And we think that source of funding will be a really good opportunity going forward to think about charging and fueling infrastructure projects. Maybe I'll stop there. Maybe just the last thing on the land in our right of way. In addition to charging and fueling infrastructure needs, just to put out there, if folks aren't aware of really the truck parking shortage that exists in California in many places, and the really extreme safety hazards that truckers and other motorists have right now with parking on shoulders. And there's a very sad number of accidents and even fatalities every year associated with trucks parking on the sides of highways instead of designated truck parking locations. So we're thinking at Caltrans, how can we help the state reduce those incidents and increase truck parking opportunities, but also when we develop those, we want to put ZEV infrastructure at those sites.
Thanks, Jimmy. That's yeah, really great points. We can go to Janine.
Thank you. Yes, Janine Tackett. I'm a supervisor in the grants department here. I oversee our heavy duty on-road programs, trucks, and was part of the team that wrote the famous Watt EV project that we just won. So that's what I'll be talking about today. And Todd definitely was very sorry he couldn't attend today. We just kicked off budget season and he is neck deep in budget stuff, working on securing us the most money for next fiscal year. So we were just recently awarded through the Federal Highway Administration CFI grant $56 million to partner with Watt EV on building out two large infrastructure locations. So we will be building out in Taft and Gustine. So basically down at the southern portion of the valley and up at the northern portion of the valley to kind of help bridge that gap as trucks are traveling through the state. These locations are on the I-5 fueling corridor and are going to be quite large. So just to kind of give you a little concept, these will be full service truck stops. Well, I shouldn't say truck stops, rest stops, because they will be accommodating passenger vehicles as well. So along with all of the charging infrastructure, there will also be other amenities that you typically find at rest stops. Food supply, convenience store type things. They are being designed with a variety of drive-through options, pass-through charging and traditional pull-up charging, because we are looking at both the passenger vehicles and the medium and heavy-duty trucks. So real quick rundown as to what these two facilities are going to be implementing. We'll have a total of 90 DC fast chargers for passenger vehicles across the two sites, 85 DC fast chargers for medium heavy duties, and 17 megawatt charging standard MSC chargers for the heavy duty vehicles. And that's across both sites. So it's split pretty evenly between the two sites. Both sites will be publicly accessible. And I believe they will be 24/7 open in operation. So, great to have for those traveling through the valley, either going, north to south in the state or south to north. There will also be collectively 63 acres of solar charging solar panels to help support the facilities, and 5.5 megawatt of battery electric storage system. So definitely big project. We are super excited to have secured that funding and to see these chargers come to the valley, because we definitely, as we saw on that map, we've got a big dead zone kind of in the middle of the state. And it's definitely something that's needed. As far as other projects that we're working on, we have an in-house heavy-duty infrastructure program that we fund with a variety of sources, both state and local funds. So that is kind of just churning in the background. Those are much smaller projects. And many of those are private use, specifically installing charging infrastructure at a fleet's primary yard. And then on top of that, we are going after every penny we can as new solicitations come out. We've heard a lot about different solicitations today. So anything that we are eligible to apply for and have a project partner for, we will be going after. So hopefully, we can bring some more dollars to the valley and help fill in that big gap that we're seeing there in the middle of the state.
Thanks, Janine. I'll turn to Patricia. some great points there we can double back on.
Sounds great. And good morning, everyone. This is Patricia Kwan. I'm in the Technology Demonstration Group at South Coast Air Quality Management District. And we've been busy down here as well. So I think everyone knows our jurisdiction, but we're kind of roughly the sort of greater Los Angeles urbanized portions of LA, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. So on the technology demonstration side, a lot of the work we've done has led to commercialization of various technologies, including heavy and medium duty trucks, battery electric trucks, and charging infrastructure. We're working on hopefully getting fuel cell trucks to the point of commercialization. And then that work in turn has fed into our incentive programs such as Moyer, Prop 1B, VW, Voucher Incentive Program, AB 617 to get these technologies, both in fleets and then in disadvantaged communities. So we have been pretty busy. So on the Moyer side, what we found from doing our demonstration projects, we've really realized that infrastructure, especially on the heavy duty side, is a real limitation in getting more of these zero emission vehicles and cargo handling equipment out there. And so we have really focused on getting money for infrastructure, providing funding, and going after funding. So we had a Moyer solicitation in 2023, and we're actually taking about $200 million worth of projects to the board for infrastructure. And we released another infrastructure Moyer and solicitation in December 2023, and that closes in February for another 200 million. But in addition, we've been pretty busy submitting grant proposals, like all the agencies here have on this call. So, we submitted a proposal for CalSTA, for PIDP, for the EPA Clean Air Technology Initiative, CFI, CARB. There was a CARB CC joint solicitation on heavy duty pilots, demos, and then on DERA. And we did get some of those funds. We got a CalSTA award for 76 million for heavy duty charging and hydrogen fueling. We've gotten some money from EPA for heavy duty fuel cell trucks. We're also going off-road with the plug-in hybrid tugboat from EPA, and then also EPA Clean Air Technology Initiative on a medium duty battery electric work truck. So we've been kind of going on a number of sectors, both on vehicle and infrastructure. And we see that this year, 2024, is really shaping up to have some really amazing, I think, one-time only opportunities, given maybe some uncertainty about what the next administration is going to look like. But, we have been working on coordinating with our regional partners here in Southern California, with SCAG, with LA County, with the ports, on trying to position our region for, the EPA climate pollution reduction grants that is going to be due beginning of April, EPA clean ports. We're looking at the MERIT fiscal year 2024 port infrastructure development program. We're looking at EPA clean heavy duty vehicles, and then EPA targeted airshed, which is probably going to be coming out later this year. And of course, the Cummins diesel emission settlement, we're closely monitoring that. We think that there's going to be some opportunities for the state of California. So, in implementing our current projects, we got a CARB CC award, and also the ports, both ports and the MSRC supported us on the JETSI project, and CalSTART and EPRI are also working on that project on various data collection activities. That really focused on large deployments of Class 8 battery electric trucks, both Daimler and Volvo, 50 trucks at 2 different fleets, Schneider and NFI, and 16 350 kilowatt fast chargers at Schneider, 19 at NFI. NFI is also, just for good measure, putting in 1 megawatt of solar, 5 megawatts of energy storage, 4 megawatt hours of energy storage. And so that NFI installation is a bit more protracted. It's actually taking place in 2 phases, temporary power, permanent power. And that is also actually brought into our focus, the realization that utility policies and I think the way that projects, combined projects with infrastructure, solar and storage are permitted or handled with the utility, that I think, that there could be some updates on that utility policy that are badly needed to make that kind of combined project easier to implement, because it is taking a longer time and it is coming under some kind of primary service distribution requirements and some other challenges. And so we didn't realize that we'd have to kind of get so entrenched on the utility policy, but it has kind of been really a good opportunity for us to be informed. And I think that also kind of makes us even more excited about projects such as e-truck with this MCS charging. We realize that it's important to support these types of projects, to have to push that technology envelope, not just on the charging infrastructure, but also getting OEMs interested in developing future model year trucks that are MCS capable. We want to expand the horizons for that Class 8 battery electric truck. We don't want it to just be for drayage. I mean, it's obviously an extremely important segment, but we'd like to see some other types of segments occur as well, to have these trucks travel across the state of California, go to our different regions. And so we're kind of looking at creating projects. We have also applied for projects that go traveling across multiple regions. And so, we're very excited about, the projects that we are currently administering, the projects we've proposed on that we're hoping to hear from soon, and then these upcoming funding opportunities. We think that there's a lot of learning that has taken place, will continue to take place, and that we look forward to partnering with the rest of you on the call to continue that learning. So I'll just leave it there because I know that we want to have plenty of time for discussion.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, we have about 10, 15 more minutes for discussion. That's great. Just to kick that off, everybody here is overviewed some amazing things here, and please use the chat if you have a question here or want to chime in. Also, I'm curious, just then, given what everybody has outlined, where, when you're thinking about an implementation, I mean, where are you using the kind of, where are you coming up with the idea that that a high power charger needs to be in one of these sites? Like, are these ideas lying around? Are you using assessments that are out there? Where in the information ecosystem then, I think, do some of the outputs of this project and then other similar kind of plans get used? If I can kind of throw that in there, in Jimmy's case, right, you're, the not just the dimensions, but the configuration of the sites in the network was a key thing. Elizabeth, and what you outlined, right? There are certain assumptions that are using around what should be deployed. I think that's one thing that we're interested in.
For us at South Coast AQMD, and please everyone else can chime in, we see that higher power, that MCS charging, as being important in terms of expanding the range of the trucks significantly. We do realize that it is going to be an evolutionary leap on the truck side. This is not any minor effort by the OEMs, but we think for interregional travel, interstate travel, we want fleets to kind of expand their utilization of the trucks and their ability to, and we think that higher powered charging is part of that equation.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael, I can say for the other question of, how do we narrow in on exact locations? It's an interesting one from the state perspective. In the CFI grant, we proposed broad, regional basis of, how many charging stations, hydrogen fueling stations we're proposing. And our idea was then to, if we were awarded funding, to do a competitive solicitation to, private sector would propose the exact sites and locations. And the challenge from the public sector side, if we were to go in and say, to this FHWA application and say, we think a charging station should be at, exit 300 on I-5, you could be effectively choosing a winner, ahead of being awarded funding if there's, one property owner at a site, for example. So given the timeline of the funding program, we're going to do the competitive nature on the back end and propose, more regional aspects to our application. So maybe that's just one consideration from a public sector standpoint of, being able to choose a specific location. And we know from conversations with utilities that in many cases, they know the exact location in an area that would be more suitable or less suitable from a power standpoint availability. But then even them sharing that information could result in, unfair market advantages and, speculation in real estate issues that I've heard from them that they don't want to necessarily get in as well. So a challenge there just in terms of fairness and competitiveness.
Yeah,
Here
that
in
makes.
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, jump in. Yeah.
I was just
Jenny?
going to say, here in the Valley, we've probably got some slightly different challenges than other locations just because of the vast area that we cover and the fact that we have a lot of rural land in between cities. So there's some big distances there, but also for the fact that we are kind of a pass through for the big ports, right? Whether it's, the Bay Area or South Coast area, and those trucks picking up product and traveling through the state, they're likely passing through the Valley. So as far as locations go, we really are looking at areas where we think would be distance-wise most suitable for trucks coming from out of the Valley, where they will likely need to recharge, considering ranges and things of that of the current equipment that's out there. But then also the ease of being able to get on and off the major transportation corridors and what areas have that accessibility and the power supply. As far as, other sources of kind of where we've looked at for information on what the needs are, is we've had lots of conversations with our Valley-based fleets and the trucking industry in general. I think the concept of the megawatt chargers and the fast charging is something that's consistently brought up by the fleets. Like, they need to be able to pull in, get a charge quickly, and get that driver back on the road. Right? Because every minute counts when you talk about moving goods, especially here in the Valley with a lot of agricultural products, fresh produce and such being transported. We have to be, careful that we're not setting up a infrastructure network that doesn't meet the fast turnaround needs of the trucks that are going to be operating here.
And I can quickly add a couple other points to both the high power charging question and the location question. So I think we are in the process of publishing our second AB 2127 report. And I think the first report didn't necessarily have a large focus on MDHD because of the availability of trucks and the fleets driving them. And so I think in early modeling, assumptions were made that a fleet could potentially use lower power charging if they're charging at a depot overnight versus higher power charging if they're charging along corridors or en route. I think we've received a lot of feedback from fleets that are now actually using these vehicles in their daily operations, saying that high power charging is going to be necessary for both applications. And so thinking through both how to incorporate high power and lower power charging at depots, and then also how higher power charging en route is going to be important. And then just to location, I think Jimmy's answer was great. And I'll just add that for us at CEC, this is our first kind of solicitation in this area. So I think location is really up in the air in terms of where do we start? We have to start somewhere, but I think over time, as we release the solicitation annually and understand where where stations are going, it may be something that we can refine to better target where these locations are needed. But I think for the first go around, it's kind of open to what's available and what locations we can start with.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elizabeth. Like, and it goes back to something that I guess here's another question. I think we have I'll leave it there. We have some time for discussion a little bit, but 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah, I think Patricia, you acknowledge that this is, you're right, like a transformative technology, and then I think what we're hearing is that on the other side, this is being driven by. I'm worried. I'm wondering about the link between available information and where the information gaps are that kind of make it clear that that there are these needs out there for the technology to be deployed at the sites. Like currently I'm hearing that it's a little bit like, right, yes, we need higher power charging in general. It's a technology decision. But on the other hand, what's the information out there that's determining 17 chargers as opposed to 18 or 19 at a site where that's a little bit fuzzier. It's just that's sort of just demanded by needs at the moment, and the knowledge that high power charging just helps. Is there anything, information that we can develop or that you see as like a priority for developing to make that kind of decision more precise or help, more coordinated? What's more useful around that?
Well, I was going to say, I think there's still a lot we can learn from the available technology of 350 kilowatt charging and the Class 8 battery electric trucks. We've noticed on for JETSI, for both the Schneider and the NFI deployments, that there's still some fine tuning and, communication protocols between the truck and the charging, and optimization that's still having to occur. And we're trying to use projects like JESTC to really refine those learnings and lessen the pain point for the fleets so that they don't have to spend weeks after the deployment is completed to have to continue to optimize their operations because of these communications, that every OEM's truck has with the different charging, manufacturers. So I think that's something that we're continuing to have to learn and refine. And so that's something we can also carry over on the MCS charging side. So yes, there's still plenty to learn. We're not just, trying to force the technology and wait, for that to develop. I mean, just from our current larger scale deployments, there's a lot to be to learn, to refine, to disseminate and share with others, and to kind of bring that learning forward.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. Anybody else on that?
Yeah, this is Leslie. So my question is on the split or the ratio in a lot of these studies, especially for that regional haul, long haul trucking, the assumptions on adoption, like of, where adoption might land in the fuel cell realm versus the, Class 8 realm and the need for that high power charging. Because you look at it today and you go, there's a lot of trucks out there that are battery electric, and this is a big barrier. But as Patricia notes, we're still working out. These are still in demonstration. These are still in demonstration fleets. We're not exactly sure. We can't pick a winner at this point. And there is a demonstration that's going to be starting. It's actually a pilot project with the one in Port of Oakland with First Element Fuels, 30 Hyundai Class 8 fuel cell trucks. That's going to already right out the gate have that fast refueling protocol that we're seeking in megawatt charging. And so, that could be a really big game changer. So I'm always curious about how much investment we put into establishing high power charging corridors in areas when we're not really sure, the ultimate utility of this technology, and the capability of it. We haven't proven anything out yet. So I worry about sunken costs. I get that there's a need for it, but I really, these are really, really big investments. And so I just felt like I want to put my 2 cents in there. It's being, the hydrogen fuel cell advocate, of course, but at the same time, we all are aware of that there's a lot of companies that really want to put their eggs in this basket, presuming the infrastructure is supported. So just want to lay it out there. So I did have a question way early in the chat when it came to one of those earlier presentations of maybe it was Elizabeth, like what was the ratio that we're using when we're trying to determine how many megawatt chargers, how many fast charge, how many different types of charger versus in route versus depot are needed over time? What is the split or the assumption that we're using to determine, what we think, how many might go into the fuel cell range versus how many in the battery electric range? So just asking you all to keep that on your radar. Thank you.
And I'll quickly add that, yeah, I agree, Leslie. It is a challenge. With both the reports, we've used different scenarios. So we've used our own forecasting model. We've used CARB's scoping plan. We've used, I think we might have had a scenario for arches. So I think, especially with the hydrogen report, that one is due every 3 years. I think in the off years, we're going to work on getting more data, refining what those scenarios look like, working on those models. So, for the first one I mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so that's something we'll continue to work on.
Thanks for that. Actually, I think we're at time here. Nate, do we have I want to we're almost at the half hour here, so I just want to turn to you real quick. But I want to thank everybody for their comments and their participation. I think we can keep the discussion going through email. This project is definitely engaged in all of these issues, so wanted to really thank everyone for for the discussion here.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks to all our guest speakers for sharing all the good work you're doing. So to close out the meeting, we have our next steps. Our next TAC meeting will be July 10th, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. PST. And please feel free to email me any additional feedback you may have from this meeting. And also be on the lookout for a follow-up summary email with this meeting slides and recording. Next slide. And Watson, did you want to jump in here?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank the speakers and this great discussion and thank everybody for participating. And again, we'd love to hear more from you. And if folks want to have suggested topics for our next meeting there, please reach out to Nate, Yasna, myself, or anybody on the team there. Again, really appreciate everybody's time. I know everybody's super busy and this is, but we do want to kind of make sure that we're coordinated with all the activities. Yasna, anything to also wrap up here?
No, except that I wish we had another half hour to
Yeah.
discuss some of the things that we just kind of started picking on. I
Yeah.
really invite everybody to send us emails in the meantime, right? Maybe as soon as you get off of this call and you have thoughts, just shoot them over. They don't have to be elaborate or anything. We've gotten some nice comments in the commentary. There's lots of work to be done, and I think on this call at least, we've covered California and California topics. We also want to think about how this project will be informing some of the national work, right? That's happening at the Federal Highway. So thank you, our Federal Highway friends, for attending today. But we hope to have also more presence from DOE, from EPA. John, thank you. Bring other colleagues when you need to. So we want to make this work out for the national efforts as well. But California sometimes leads, whether we like it or not, we do. So Thank you all very much. Anyway, I just encourage you to write your thoughts and send them over to us. There's enough work to do just in California, and there's more even to do.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your week.
Thank you.